The time for his first fight had come around quickly. He'd hardly been given time to think about it at all. Raven looked down at his hands and was not surprised to see they were shaking. His opponent's name was Wilson. Raven knew nothing else about him. He'd never spoken to him, had never even met him. Had they passed one another in the dining hall and never even looked up? If he had spoken to him, would that make what he was about to do any easier? He heard heavy footsteps in the corridor and his heart jumped into his throat. They were coming for him. His eyes remained fixed on his shaking hands as the mechanical doors to his prison cell buzzed and swung open. "Let's go!" The order was sharp and direct. Raven stood to face the guards, crazy thoughts flashing through his mind. He could attack both guards, knock them out, and escape. But then what would he do? There were guards everywhere, security gates, locked doors. It was impossible to escape. He felt a surge of panic flood his mind. His chest felt tight, and he sucked in irregular breaths. He steadied himself, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. "Come on, let's go!" one of the guards commanded again. He ignored them. He had to calm himself down before he got in the ring, or he'd be dead within seconds. "Keep yourself together," he breathed out, and with it, he felt some of his panic dissolve. When he opened his eyes, he was ready to go. He was marched towards the arena, but instead of entering through the main doors, where the other prisoners were herded like cattle to watch the fights, he was led through a side door leading to a changing room. They sat him down, told him to get ready, and left him alone with his fear. Anxiety swirled in his head. Was this it? Was this the moment when he would die? How could he bring himself to kill another, just so that he could live? What made his life more valuable than Wilson's? He waited. It seemed like hours before the commentator's brash voice echoed around the theater. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have quite a treat. He won 2 spectacular fights in a row. Can tonight be his third? Please welcome the undefeated Wilson!" Deafening whoops and cheers echoed around the arena. "And facing him tonight," Raven's heart leapt, "in his Salverford debut, fighting for his honor, his dignity, and his life, it's Raven!" Raven knew he had no choice but to go into the ring. He had been in the amphitheater many times before. Like the other prisoners, he had been dragged there and forced to watch every time 2 inmates battered each other to death. But this was different. When he stepped out onto the walkway, he saw Salverford in a completely different light. Bloodthirsty crowds calling for his death, TV cameras pointing into his face as millions of people around the world watched and waited to see his gruesome fate. He reluctantly made his way along the raised pathway between the crowds of prisoners and shakily made his way to the ring. As he passed, he looked down at the upturned faces of his fellow prisoners watching him. They were shouting, cheering, singing, dancing. From high up, they looked small, insignificant. Yet somehow they were the most frightening thing he'd ever seen. Tiny creatures waiting to devour him. He shuddered as he walked through and kept his eyes on his destination. The ring, where he would either be killed in cold blood or stain his own hands with the blood of another. As he approached and ducked through the ropes, he cast his eyes over his opponent. Wilson was taller than he was, with broad shoulders and the beginnings of a substantial gut. His light blue eyes may once have been gentle, but now they shone with a fierce determination to stay alive at all costs. His large, coarse hands were already curled into fists, and Raven could see his chest heaving up and down in anticipation, excitement, fear. Raven couldn't tell. Wilson cut an imposing figure, and Raven's terror stepped up a notch, threatening to overtake his mind and cloud all rational thought. Raven took a few deep breaths and forced himself to be calm. He ran another appraising eye over his opponent and tried to see the positives. Sure, Wilson was taller, but Raven was slim, athletic, and fast. He could use that to his advantage, and maybe he could kill Wilson after all. As soon as that positivity boosted his morale, Raven's conscience kicked in to drag him back down again. He thought about who Wilson was as a person. What were his hobbies? Had he ever been in love? What was his crime? Maybe he was innocent. But if he wasn't, if he was a murderer or a rapist, would that really make this any easier? The bell rang.